Daisy Coleman, at first glance, embodied kindness, intelligence, and talent. But behind her attractive exterior hid a suffering soul that had endured terrible events at a young age. Daisy was born on March 30, 1997, in the small town of Albany, Missouri, to a family of Dr. Michael and veterinarian Melinda Coleman. She was the second of 4 children, with 3 brothers. Tragedy struck in 2009 when Michael and one of the younger sons went to a wrestling competition in a neighboring town. On the way, their car hit an obstacle and flew into a ditch. Daisy's father died at the scene. After that, the family moved to the larger city of Maryville, where the mother raised the children alone. It was hard, but Melinda managed. However, no one in the family, devastated by the loss, could have imagined what other misfortune awaited them. Early in the morning of January 8, 2012, 14-year-old Daisy came to her senses in the yard of her own house. The thermometer read 0. The girl lay on the snow, her hair frozen to the ground. She was wearing only a t-shirt and sweatpants. "Am I dead?" was the first thought that flashed through her mind. She could neither get up nor scream, her speech was slurred. Daisy cried bitterly. Barely moving her numb limbs, she crawled to the front door and pounded on it with the last of her strength. The clock showed 5 in the morning. Luckily, her mother heard the knock, even though she was sleeping in a room with her youngest son. Melinda thought it was the dogs trying to get into the house to warm up. Throwing on a robe, she went to open the door. On the doorstep, the woman saw her daughter, who lay unconscious on the cold steps. Daisy reeked of alcohol. She wasn't speaking, only sobbing. The frightened Melinda called her sons for help. They instantly ran downstairs and brought their frozen sister inside. The whole family was horrified. At first, they tried to warm the girl with blankets, but upon closer inspection, the mother suspected severe frostbite on her legs. She filled the bathtub with water and ordered her sons to take Daisy there and leave. The unconscious girl was undressed, and the mother saw huge bruises and red marks on her daughter's legs. Only then did Melinda realize that something terrible had happened to her beloved child. Daisy was carefully immersed in a bathtub of cool water. As a veterinarian, the woman knew what to do for frostbite. Gradually raising the water temperature, she slowly warmed her daughter's body. It helped. Soon Daisy regained consciousness, although she still spoke poorly. Melinda, seriously alarmed, called the police. The officer who arrived at the scene examined the victim. Alcohol still clouded her mind, so the girl couldn't explain what had happened to her that night. They had to question Daisy's friend Paige, who had stayed over at the Coleman's house that night in the same room. Here's what she said. On Saturday, January 7th, Daisy invited Paige for a sleepover. In the evening, the girlfriends watched horror movies while sipping strong drinks secretly stolen from the Coleman's home bar. Closer to night, Daisy started texting her older brother's friend, 17-year-old Matthew Barnett, a popular player on the school football team. Learning that the girls were bored, he sent them a message, "Hey, wanna have some fun at my place?" Daisy and Paige were delighted by the offer and agreed without hesitation to meet up with Matthew and his friends. Already on January 8, around 1 in the morning, the girlfriends crawled out of Daisy's bedroom window and ran around the corner of the house, where Matthew and 4 of his buddies were waiting for them. The guys took the girls to their place, helped them get into the basement through a window, and asked them to be quiet so as not to wake Matthew's parents, who were sleeping upstairs. Paige says that as soon as they went down to the basement, Matthew started plying Daisy with alcohol. Her friend sat and watched as Daisy drained one shot after another. At some point, another boy, Nicholas, took Paige by the hand and led her to an adjacent empty room in the basement, where they had his initiative. Meanwhile, Matthew and Daisy shut themselves in another room with a large bed. A couple of times the door opened, and Paige managed to catch a glimpse of what was happening to her friend. She was lying on the bed almost unconscious, unable to speak or move. Matthew took advantage of her helpless state and his friend Jordan filmed it all on his smartphone camera. At 2 in the morning, the guys decided to head home. They put the girls in the car and drove them to the Coleman's house. Paige got out first. Matthew said that Daisy needed to sit in the cold to sober up. He assured them that they would stay with her and take her inside. Told Paige to go to bed and they would take care of Daisy. The friend believed him, went in by herself, crawled through the bedroom window, got into bed and instantly fell asleep. Meanwhile, the guys pulled Daisy out of the car and stood her up, holding her so she wouldn't fall. The girl was nauseated, so they took off her shoes, grabbed her purse with her phone, and held her hair while she vomited. Then they laid her on the cold ground near the house and fled in the car as fast as they could, afraid of being noticed. For about 3 hours, Daisy lay outside in 0-degree weather wearing just a t-shirt and sweatpants, without tights or shoes. Her hair was wet and frozen. The police who arrived at the call searched the house and yard. In Daisy's room, they found 5 empty liquor bottles. Outside, they found her purse, phone, shoes and traces of vomit. That same morning, the girl was taken to the hospital. Doctors documented bruises on her legs and tears in her genital area. Tests showed that her blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit. After a few hours in the hospital, Daisy regained consciousness. She claimed she didn't remember anything, couldn't recall the details of the previous night, only admitting that she drank too much. She didn't deny that she took alcohol from the home cabinet without her mother's permission and ran off to the boys at night. By 11 a.m. on January 8, the police had tracked down Matthew Barnett, Jordan, and Nicholas Gromulus. They were charged and taken to the station for questioning. Matthew didn't deny having Daisy Coleman that night but insisted it was consensual. He said that when he met the girls, Daisy and her friend Paige were already drinking. At first, Matthew denied pouring Daisy alcohol himself, but the more he talked, the more he got tangled up in his testimony. Eventually, the boy admitted that he did ply Daisy with strong drinks, allegedly to melt her icy heart. During he used a condom, which he threw away on the way when driving Daisy home. Jordan refused to talk but later admitted that he filmed Matthew kissing Daisy on Nicholas's phone. The video lasted about 10 seconds, he managed to show it to his friends and then got scared and deleted it. Nicholas, who had with Daisy's friend Paige, was the only one immediately convicted and sent to a juvenile detention center because he confessed to everything right away. Matthew's friend, in whose car the boys rode with the girls, said that when he was driving them, Daisy cried the whole way, and Matthew lamented that her brother Charlie would kill him if he found out. It then surfaced that a couple of days before the incident, Matthew had dinner with the Coleman family in a friendly atmosphere. And already at 1 p.m. on January 8, the police searched the basement of the Barnett house, seizing bedding, several empty bottles, men's underwear, and disposable cups. During repeated interrogations, the deputy sheriff, after listening to Matthew, let slip that girls often do all sorts of stupid things to get attention, and this case was probably one of those. He praised Matthew for at least driving Daisy home but paid no attention to the fact that he left her freezing outside. Several days passed, Daisy fully recovered, and her life was no longer in danger. However, she still couldn't remember more about that terrible night. In March 2012, 2 months later, the charges against Matthew Barnett and Jordan were dropped. The district attorney concluded that everything happened by mutual consent. Although several of Jordan's classmates claimed they saw the video he deleted, where Matthew kisses Daisy, it could not be recovered. Examination of the couple's phones showed that Matthew and Daisy communicated about once a month. In the correspondence, the girl hinted that she was ready to sleep with him for a bottle of liquor. They also found their suggestive flirtatious messages dating back to before January 8. After Matthew was released, it became known that he was the grandson of Rex Barnett, an influential politician and former deputy. Rex was a member of the Committee on Criminal Law and Public Safety and was acquainted with many prosecutors and high-ranking police officers throughout Missouri. Matthew and Jordan were set free and returned to their normal lives. Daisy, on the other hand, hoped that the fuss around that night would die down. She continued going to school, but instead of support from her peers, she faced contempt and ridicule. Most sided with Matthew, calling her a drunk and a slut. Daisy instantly turned into an outcast, withdrew into herself, and spent more time alone at home. The girl, who had previously led an active social life, played sports, and danced, seemed to vanish. She also had to quit the school cheer squad. Melinda, Daisy's mother, began receiving daily threats both at home and at work. Soon, she was asked to resign from the vet clinic where she had worked for many years. Eventually, the Coleman family decided they could no longer stay in Maryville. They moved away. And in the spring of 2013, their empty house, put up for sale, burned down. The police never determined the cause of the fire. Rumor had it that it was the work of Matthew Barnett's father. A little later, under no less mysterious circumstances, the house of Paige, Daisy's friend, also burned down. By that time, the girls were no longer communicating. Paige, by the way, also became a school outcast and suffered from nightmares for a long time. Time passed, and Daisy's story got into the media. The girl began to receive support from people all over the country, those who had to go through something similar. She even managed to reopen the case against her main offender, Matthew Barnett. A trial was held, but the boy was found guilty only of leaving Daisy alone in the cold that night. Matthew received 2 years of probation and had to pay the Coleman family $1,800 in compensation. The other boys involved in that night got off scot-free. Daisy lived on, regularly receiving not only words of support but also threats from anonymous people on the internet. She realized how unfair people could be. Daisy took every negative comment about her very painfully. In 2016, when 19-year-old Daisy was in college, the film Audrey and Daisy was released on Netflix, a documentary about bullying, harassment on social media, and what it can lead to. Daisy became one of the main characters of the film, telling her story in it. But the case of another girl, Audrey from California, turned out to be even worse. Audrey had almost the same thing happen to her as Daisy in 2012. But while Daisy was able to survive it, Audrey was not. Her photos spread through the network at an incredible speed, everyone saw them, both friends and foes. Audrey's last post on social media, "My life is ruined. The whole school knows about this. I will never get rid of this reputation. Everyone knows how bad I am. I want it to end." 9 days later, Audrey was gone. She couldn't bear the humiliation that poured on her from all sides. Audrey's parents managed to get the case opened only 6 months after her death. The 3 guilty boys were sentenced to 30 to 45 days behind bars. Later, their families paid the girls' parents about $1 million in moral damages. In 2018, Daisy Coleman tried to start a new life. She moved to Colorado and got a job at a tattoo parlor. At the same time, the girl was working on another film dedicated to her recovery. But in June of the same year, fate dealt Daisy another devastating blow. Her mother Melinda and brother Tristan got into a car accident on their way to visit Daisy. 19-year-old Tristan died at the scene. It is still unknown what caused the crash. After this tragedy, Daisy wrote on social media that it was getting harder and harder for her to fight her demons, smile and pretend that everything was okay. Having recovered from the loss of her brother, she founded a charity organization to help victims of. Daisy continued to share her story, supporting people with similar fates. In her posts, she admitted how sometimes it was not easy to deal with heavy thoughts, emotional pain, panic attacks, and horrific memories. In the summer of 2020, 23-year-old Daisy complained to friends that some man was stalking her, regularly sending threats. The girl repeatedly went to the police, filed reports, begged for help. She claimed that the unknown person had been watching her since December 2019. But all her pleas remained unanswered. On Tuesday, August 4, 2020, Daisy tweeted that she was afraid to even stick her nose outside. She said she couldn't walk the dog or go to work because she was scared. She confessed that she had stopped eating and sleeping. A few hours later, another post appeared on Facebook. Daisy reported that some man had come to her house and knocked on the door. She wrote that she was very frightened. She assumed that the stranger could have stolen her keys earlier and now had access to the apartment. She also mentioned that he had stolen her photo and created a fake account on an escort service website, where he was offering money on Daisy's behalf. Melinda, the girl's mother, read these messages and called the Colorado police. She asked them to check on Daisy. At 4 p.m., officers arrived at the call. Daisy opened the door for them and let them into the house. The police stayed with her for about an hour. They listened to her story about the stalker. However, they did not notice anything alarming in the girl's behavior. Shortly after they left, 23-year-old Daisy called her boyfriend on a video call. In the middle of the conversation, she took out a gun, put it to herself, and pulled the trigger. The guy didn't immediately understand what had happened. The connection was cut off. Daisy stopped answering. He immediately called 911. When at 8 p.m. the police arrived at Daisy Coleman's house again, she was no longer breathing. Melinda, the girl's mother, reported the tragedy on social media. "She was my best friend and a wonderful daughter," the woman wrote. "If only I could take her pain. She never recovered from what those boys did to her at school. It's so unfair. My little girl is gone." According to Melinda, she fought for years for Daisy's mental health. She is convinced that she did everything possible for her daughter. She admitted that in recent months, Daisy really was being stalked. And recently, the girl found out that she would never be able to have children. Shortly after Daisy's death, the tattoo parlor where she worked was robbed. The thief made off with an album of her exclusive designs and her tattoo machine. 4 months passed. In December 2020, 58-year-old Melinda Coleman published another heartfelt post dedicated to her beloved daughter. And then she took a gun and did the same as Daisy. The Coleman family was left with 2 sons, older Charlie and younger Logan. The charity fund founded by Daisy organized a fundraiser to support the boys. It is known that things turned out well for Matthew Barnett. After the death of Daisy and her mother, the man expressed his condolences to the Coleman family. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.